The importance of friends was one reason why he was so incredibly generous to them all, and why parties and entertaining his friends were so important to him. Gifts and gifts, giving were always for Freddie to repay the friendship he received. For one birthday party he threw, 40 people sat down at the same table, created from several separate tables in the sitting room at the garden lodge. Although it was his birthday and people brought him presents, he in turn gave all his guests presents. I was dispatched to Tiffany's in Bond Street and picked up an assortment of gifts, suitable for both men and women, costing about £50 each. I think that here it is useful to stress that at no time on any occasion, including the wonderful hat party, was there anyone remotely resembling a dwarf carrying anything remotely resembling a ball of cocaine. There, bang, another myth exploded. At another festive occasion, this time one of his famed Christmas lunches, everyone present received a glittering brooch from Butler and Wilson, Straker's being, I remember, a fizzing champagne glass, so there are many bits of Freddie still around in people's lives. The small treasures that he gave and took such delight in giving are in fact huge treasures to those of us who cherish them still. I received an Afghan-like dog in the form of a lapel brooch. And speaking of Christmases, wherever he was in the world, whether New York, Munich or London, he was always one for the traditional. He insisted on a Christmas tree, although very rarely when abroad did he manage to secure the size of the ones we had in Garden Lodge. You had a certain deal view of what Christmas should be. Whether Zoroastrians celebrate Christmas, I don't know, but Freddie had picked up the notion somewhere along the line. Christmas, as he celebrated it, was a very British thing, and he was drawn to what he perceived were traditional British roots. His active part and involvement in the proceedings was telling everybody else what to do and where to put things and how to hang decorations. At Garden Lodge, Jim always arranged the table centerpiece and kept it a secret until the last minute. A mixture of seasonal flowers and fir cones and Christmas baubles, Blue Peter and its yogurt pots, Lural cores and sticky back plastic had nothing on what Jim Hutton came up with. Not that Freddie would even wrap presents himself. Most of them came pre-wrapped and packaged from the shop because Cartier, Tiffany and Lalique do that kind of thing. Christmas cards he chose from the selection which I would go out and buy, but he would always write the card himself. He would go through his own address book and write the envelopes, although these would frequently not be posted, as inside many of them he would also include a check. It was how we in the household always received our Christmas bonuses. The cast list for Christmas Day's lunch would start being prepared at the beginning of December, with a basic list being added to, subtracted from, and generally changed and swapped around daily. It almost became a tradition that on Christmas Eve he would have open house. Mike Moran would, latterly, always be there to play the piano, and everyone would gather to sing carols. Talk of British tradition. What could be more Victorian than carols around the piano? Freddie used to enjoy the carol singing, I think almost as much as all the other parts of Christmas together. I remember one year he was overjoyed when Stephanie Beecham and her children were there, all singing carols. This communal singing business he always thoroughly enjoyed, often holding impromptu choral harmony sessions, especially when in the company of Straker and Kenny Everett. Whether his enjoyment came from his time at English boarding school at Pangani, India, who knows? Christmas time was always a poignant anniversary regarding Freddie's friendship with Kenny Everett. Kenny had been extremely influential in breaking Bohemian Rhapsody on Capital Radio in 1975, introducing the 7-minute single to a nation accustomed only to the 3.5-minute soundbite. It seems incredible and rather farcical now to remember that this intense friendship between two highly emotional people broke up because of a confrontation over drug use. It wasn't even a head-to-head argument. There was no one-on-one row. It was relayed to Freddie, by some kind of friend, of course, that Kenny thought that Freddie was quite happy using anybody else's drugs without providing any himself. When Freddie heard this, he couldn't believe his ears, because it was his own feeling that the boot was in fact on the other foot, and that it was Kenny who was always appropriating anyone else's stash other than his own. Freddie's opinion was similarly related back to Kenny, and the situation then arose, which I think everyone must have encountered, where it became impossible to patch up a hole that never was. Polarization ensued, pride took over, and the rest is conjecture, but they never spoke again after Christmas 1980. Drug-induced paranoia. What? My personal feeling is that it's just the way some friendships go. How the newspapers thought that Kenny was one of the last of Freddie's best friends to speak to him before he died, I really wouldn't like to say. At some point in the Christmas week, he would go over and see his parents and family and take their presents, but they would never be involved in any of his Christmas schedule at Garden Lodge. Freddie never mixed friends and relatives, even to the point where when his parents were invited to Garden Lodge, Joe and I had to go out. Mary would be asked to stay. His parents had grown to like her, having been introduced to her so many years before, when he and Mary were sharing a flat, and it helped to square the views of normality which he wished to give it to his parents. Normality in the strictest sense of the word. Not necessarily straight, as in heterosexual, but merely to allay any fears they might have had for him, to assure them that there was an ongoing secure continuity in his life and that no harm was coming to him. Christmas Day began at about 11 at night on Christmas Eve. After his carol session, Freddie and Troop would go to the Copacabana, which gave me a chance to get on and prepare the vegetables for the next day's banquet, for upwards of about 20 people. For me, Christmas Day would start about 9 in the morning, getting the turkey, or turkeys depending on numbers, into the oven, or ovens depending on numbers. All the traditional vegetables and trimmings were prepared, including homemade stuffing and bread sauce. We made 3 varieties of stuffing, one of sausage meat, sage and onion, then of tomato, mushroom and rice, and finally the traditional chestnut, of course. Then there were the accessories: Brussels sprouts, a carrot and pea macédoine, mashed sweets, mashed butternut squash, roast parsnips, roast potatoes, chipolata sausages rolled in bacon, and lashings of homemade gravy. All very famous 5, really. I would have made the puddings and cakes in September or October when they're traditionally supposed to be made. I must admit, Freddie did enjoy fresh homemade food. Whenever Freddie was going into the studio, we would make an assortment of sandwiches for him, although it was Joe's speciality of homemade sausage rolls, which Freddie carried in with special pride and handed around to everyone, eating perhaps only one himself. Christmas lunch would start without an appetizer at about 2 o'clock. Guests would definitely include Mary and her current beau, Jim Hutton, Peter Strake, Trevor Clark, and then it could also include Rudy Pattison, Graham Hamilton, Gordon Dalziel, Dave Clark with his friend John Christie, Yasmin Pettigrew, James Orthurst and his friend Jim, Paul Prenter when he was alive and around, and of course Joe and myself. It wasn't a necessity to watch the real Queen's message to the Commonwealth, and so after a leisurely lunch, the fun began. One of Freddie's little foibles was that everybody who came to lunch brought a gift for everyone else who was there. It was a thoroughly sweet gesture, for in that way no one would ever feel left out, and everyone would have the same amount of presents to open, except Freddie, who had millions more than anyone else. The sitting room looked like a war zone of waste paper, and great care was taken when throwing the paper away that nothing remained hidden inside. One walked through a sea of discarded glitter, ribbons and wrappings. From about 5 o'clock onwards, other people would begin to drop by just to wish a happy Christmas. Generally, the company would break into smaller groups in all rooms on the ground floor and intermingle and catch up on what had been happening in their lives since last they had seen each other. Friday's Christmases were meeting places for people who often didn't see each other from one year's end to the next. Geography, work patterns. Show business knows no constant structure other than impermanence. The Christmas decorations remained in place for the full 12 days of Christmas and were dismantled on January 6. New Year's Eve was always celebrated by Freddie, but in the last few years, a pattern emerged where we used to spend New York at Gordon and Graham's apartment high up in Quadrangle Tower in the Water Garden complex. He started to go to Gordon and Graham's traditional Scottish celebration when Freddie decided he no longer wanted to go to the clubs. A great deal of fun we always had.